So welcome everybody, good afternoon. And I want to welcome everybody to the Legislative Forum. Thank you for joining us for this virtual meeting. Since this forum has scheduled speakers with all microphones, they will all be turned on mute during this session. If you experience any technical difficulties or issues, good luck. But seriously, there's a tech helpline you can look at in the chat room, or you can always reach out to our faithful and great Anna Harvey, who will also be monitoring the chat room. We appreciate Anna and everything she does. Today's session is a discussion with our contract lobbyists that they will provide insight in this year's legislative session and how they are working on issues of importance to our industry. Katie Thomas, our chief lobbyist, will lead the discussion. Our lobbying team includes Katie Thomas herself, Courtney Crowder, Thomas Moore, and Rick Zucchini. Now, of course, Thomas Moore is unable to join us today, which we hate. So I'm sure all of you know Katie. We are very fortunate to have Katie representing us at the General Assembly. Katie has worked for NCR for 10 years, where she was promoted to Senior Vice President of Government Affairs. Katie currently is a partner with Focus Public Affairs, where she provides every aspect of government and regulatory advocacy. Courtney Crowder has over 20 years of experience in public affairs, government relations, and strategy. Courtney has served the legislative director and senior advisor to Governor Beverly Perdue. He currently is the Raleigh Managing Director for APCO Worldwide, an independent global public affairs and strategic communications consultancy. Many of you remember Rick, who served as the Director of Government Affairs for NCR for 9 years. Rick's background also includes serving as staff attorney for the NC General Assembly. He currently is a partner with William Mullins Raleigh office, where he works with clients on state government relations and many other issues. And of course, Thomas Moore, who is not with us, formed Cardinal Government Affairs, a firm specializing in government affairs and advocacy, where he works in many areas to accomplish his clients' goals at the state legislature and state agencies, local government, Congress, and national conferences. His expertise ranges from lobbying ethics, compliance, political action committees. As previously mentioned, he will not be with us today. We have quite an impressive group representing our interests at the state level, and I encourage you to all go and read their bios online. They can be found and accessed under the link in the chat section, so please do that. They all do an outstanding job to represent us and our interests. Next, I want to turn it over to Pam Melton. She is one of our newest staff members at NCR. She replaces Seth and serves as the Director of Political and External Communications. So Pam.
Thanks, Ray, and hello everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us for this legislative forum. And I do look forward to the day when I can meet everyone in person. And before we get into the forum discussion, I just want to talk a little about the team that represents our advocacy efforts. And I am speaking as a former North Carolina lobbyist who knows each person on our team. I've known Courtney for a long time, and I've worked with Rick in a previous job. I have also hired teams to help me with my advocacy efforts. So, I know what to look for in a good team. And I can honestly say this is truly an amazing team. First, it is rare to have an industry expert who is your contract lobbyist. And we have two in Katie and Rick. And then Courtney, Thomas, Katie, and Rick all bring a wealth of knowledge and a network of relationships with them to the table. They are all well respected and do an incredible job of representing our interests. So Before Katie speaks more about how they are representing our interests, I just wanted to kick things off with a few questions about lobbying that are general questions, not so related to what they will be doing to work for on our behalf. So I think most people understand that lobbying involves relationship building with legislators and their staff members. And but what I would like to ask is, in looking at what happens when you're in session, and what are some of the things that are part of your regular daily lobbying responsibilities that someone who has no knowledge of lobbying might not realize you guys do on a regular basis? And anyone can jump in and answer that.
I think directing new legislators to the bathroom is probably the biggest issue. You wouldn't expect it, but a lot of us have been down there a lot longer than most of the legislators, and so it is a confusing building.
And that's really not a joke. I mean, I actually counted up from the time I stepped in the building as an intern to now. It's been 25 years. This is my 25th year going in and out of the building, which is, I don't know what that says about me, but it's certainly true. I would say, sort of a take on Katie's responses. I think there might be sometimes a really sort of romanticized view of what lobbyists do, or maybe a nefarious view of what lobbyists do in terms of arm twisting and smoky rooms and all that. But quite frankly, I think we all consider ourselves to be resources of information for elected officials, and we try to situate ourselves to be sort of trusted advisors, if you will, on the topics that relate to our clients. So it's more about, that whole trick of sort of turning yourself into not the person who's arm twisting, but the person who can be trusted to bring factual information to help legislators make good decisions.
And Pam, I'm sort of on the heels of what Courtney just said. I agree with everything that Katie and Courtney have said. I often think that we are translators. I mean, we're problem solvers, we're sources of information, we help with constituent requests, et cetera. But I find that, and often is the case, that we're taking information provided by a client that may be filled with jargon, or it may be a little more detailed than our audience is accustomed, because they have to be generalists as staff and legislators. And so we take that, translate it into a form that is a little more digestible, if you will, a little more general, hopefully doesn't lose the detail, and then provide that to the legislators and the staff. And then similarly, what we do is we take the information from legislators and staff that, again, has its own jargon and detail, and translate that back to clients. So it's sort of an interesting process, and it can be challenging at times, because sometimes you find yourself, and never with realtors, but you sometimes find yourself with clients before legislators saying, well, what they're really trying to say is this, and trying to convey it in a way that's, again, just easier to convey or to understand.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much for those responses. And have one final question. So we're going to pretend for a moment here. Maybe let's pretend we're in a state like Tennessee, where they're pretty predictable and they adjourn fairly early in the year. They're on a mission and they get out of there real quickly. So my question to you is, what are you doing with your time after session ends? Courtney, are you on the golf course all day? Rick, are you on vacation until session starts?
Courtney,
On, let me catch my breath first. No, session. So when session ends, your rhythm, it hardly changes. I mean, particularly for for industries as sort of complex and relevant as real estate and the realtors issues. I mean, we're in constant conversation. We're always studying. I feel like it's more like I'm back in undergrad or grad school. I feel like we're constantly studying and trying to get smarter on these issues so that we can do that translation work that Rick just described. But otherwise, you know, I will tell you just personally, I always try to spend as much time as I can with my wife and daughters, you know, and I do try to carve out that kind of fun. You know, my wife and I have 2 daughters that are 11 and a half years apart. So I have a teenager and a toddler in my house right now, girls. And so I spend my time when I'm not preparing for session or in session, being held accountable by the ladies that surround me. That's the delicate way of putting that.
Yeah, well, you know, I was thinking as Courtney was talking, and Pam, it's a great question and one that we get a lot, as you know, and it's hard to summarize, but it does seem like in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 years that we've been in session almost more than we've not been in session, and so it doesn't really feel like there have been these gaps, or at least gaps that we're able to kind of unwind completely. But Courtney's exactly right. You know, we spend the time educating ourselves, spending more time with clients, either in person. Some of our clients will have, you know, fly-ins where they'll bring in their folks from across the country in. There are always a number of political gatherings that we attend and fundraisers, et cetera. And it's also a great opportunity, in addition to learning clients, to learn more about legislators, go into district if you can find the time. That's hard, obviously, in COVID particularly, but you know, you find that this sort of statement of the obvious, a conversation at the legislature on a Tuesday when there are committee meetings and a floor session and constituents and et cetera is a lot shorter, less focused, frankly, a little less productive and less personal than driving, you know, to Goldsboro or Haywood County and sitting down with that legislator in his or her home or office or coffee shop, and spending an hour and a half getting to know you know, the issues. And I find, and I'm sure Courtney and Katie and others, they're quite proud of their districts, and they'll talk to you about the courthouse and the new roundabout and the new restaurant and et cetera. And it's a really neat opportunity to connect. One that frankly, we used to have more of an opportunity back in the day. We just haven't had as much time, and then the layer COVID on it, it's just kind of blowing that up. So
I think I'll just sort of piggyback on the fact that with an organization like the Realtors, there really isn't a lot of downtime because we have issues that aren't just General Assembly issues. And COVID is a perfect example of that. You know, last year our legislative agendas were very short because of COVID, but starting in February, we were working on local issues and state orders to get realtors included as, you know, essential workers. And then once we get through all of that in even numbered years, we've got to deal with, you know, elections and PAC recommendations. And, you know, I look a lot to our lobbying team to give me good input because we are spreading out the work. And so there might be instances with certain legislators that, you know, I've forgotten about because I didn't have the direct conversation. And so we definitely continue to communicate all year long about all kinds of issues, not just what's happening at the General Assembly.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. That's it for my questions, and I appreciate the insight into the lobbying world. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ray.
All right. Well, thank you guys for those answers. Pretty interesting how many people ask you where the bathroom is, Katie. Well, before I turn it over to Katie, well, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and as she and the other lobbyists will provide us with insight into today's current legislative session. But I would like to start off with this question to you guys, Katie. What will be our top legislative priorities heading into this year's long session?
So thank you, Ray. And for those of you who don't know, since this is our first meeting of the year, Ray is our wonderful chairman of our legislative committee this year. So he is leading our forum in that role. And I do want to go back real quick and mention some other members of our team that just for ease of a panel discussion, we did not have all 7 of us on here, but there are 7. Thomas Moore, who we mentioned could not be here because of a prior engagement, but then also working with me is my business partner, Wendy Kelly. And she's been with the Realtors for 5 years now. Rick Zucchini has Sarah Patterson working with him, and she actually came to Rick from the South Carolina Realtors. So she had a good background in the Realtor priorities as well. And then working with Courtney is Reagan Jackson, who up until about a year ago worked with Wendy and I. And so she's represented the Realtors in a previous capacity as well. So you have a good team that has a lot of knowledge and a lot of background. And just for space and not running this as a 4-hour forum, we decided just to break it down into the heads of each office, so for the Realtor team. So with that, our legislative issues this year, we always have quite a few, but the big ones that we do big pushes on this year, and the ones that probably will be the quote unquote sexiest, and I don't know how sexy notarization can be, but the ones that probably take the cake in proactive pushes that will be larger agenda items will be first the remote online notarization. And as you'll recall, last year we were able to successfully pass and then get an extension on emergency video notarizations for folks who could not get out to notaries but needed to continue to close transactions. So the remote online notarization will allow us to have a more secure process with better document retention, better security processes in place for identification, and really help us get to a place where about 30 other states already are, and give us a permanent process in place to continue on with online notarizations. And then also, we all know that with COVID, we've had a lot of people lose their jobs, have not been able to pay their rent. We have eviction moratoriums in place in the state and country right now through the end of January, likely to be extended to as late as the end of September. And so we are going to be continuing to work as we've been doing since COVID, since these problems erupted under COVID, with the governor's office, with the General Assembly, to secure funding for rental assistance, housing assistance, mortgage assistance, things of that nature, to make sure that people are not getting thrown out of their houses whenever they, have lost their job through no fault of their own, but also understanding that landlords can't just give free rent when they have mortgages and bills to pay, and they're using some of these houses as their retirement income. And so they need to find a way to get some help as well. And so we're definitely working on that piece of legislation. We worked on it a little bit last year with House Bill 1200, and you will see something similar again this year. So those are the 2 biggest issues probably going into the session. Again, if you come to the legislative committee, I will talk to you about a great deal more issues, but so that we can really get the best out of our time here today, I want to just sort of jump into some of the questions. And we've already gotten to know a little bit about Courtney's family and that sort of thing. And Rick hired me, so you already know all you need to know about Rick. He's a very smart man. But I would like to give them just another minute to say a little bit about themselves, because I think one of the best parts of the Realtor organization is how much you care about not only your clients, but also the staff at NC Realtors. And so I want you to get a little bit more of a flavor of who they are, because I think they represent you well and you would appreciate knowing them a little better. So Courtney, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. So just a little bit more on the bio then. I think was mentioned sort of where I spent my time professionally, prior to APCO. I ran my own consultancy for about almost 8 years. And before that, worked as legislative director and senior advisor for Bev Perdue when she was governor. Spent a little bit more time prior to that in the private sector, but have, really gone between the public and private sectors for my entire career. I spent some time at the Department of Insurance, working on regulatory issues as well. I am native to North Carolina, native to the Triangle, grew up in Raleigh, and I think one of the things, maybe on the personal side that not many people know that I think that sort of contributed to sort of how I, my worldview, and probably even maybe to some degree the career path I chose, which is, I'm the seventh of 9 kids. And so I think I've always negotiated, always lobbied, always tried to find allies to get, to accomplish an objective, even if it was just getting to breakfast or dinner. And so that's a little bit more about me. I, went to school in the Triangle as well, both North Carolina Central and to the other school in Durham, Duke University, for grad school. So that's it.
So I'll try to come on the heels of Courtney. I was not a part of a baseball team of siblings there. That's hard to compete with. I worked on legislative staff, central staff, for about 4.5 years, primarily in the environment area, but also had a J committee and House Rules. And then, of course, went over to work for the Realtors for about 8 years, and really enjoyed that experience. And sort of, it's neat to come back and to continue to be a part of or have a part of that in my work life now. I guess in between, I worked for what is now Duke Energy, Progress Energy, and then went over to Williams Mullen Law Firm about, I guess, 8 years ago now. Time is really flying by. I reflected on the question about sort of an aspect of our past or what have you. I think working on central staff, I guess I was in 98 for, about 4.5 years. You work for both sides of the aisle, you staff committees, you help draft legislation for, Democrats, Republicans, et cetera. And I thought, as I reflect now, it's really good training, or was for me, for lobbying, because that's exactly what we have to do every day. We have to interact with all 170 members and their staff. It doesn't matter what their backgrounds are, party affiliation. I was thinking about the diversity, the demographic diversity, but also sort of the thinking about what these folks do as a part of their not only personal lives but professional lives, and whether that's educators, bankruptcy lawyers, funeral home directors, former law enforcement officers. It's all over the board. They're all over the state. I mean, it's sort of stating the obvious there, but you have to really stretch yourself, and it's challenging, but it's also very rewarding to be able to interact with those folks. And I think, really, to say this, I'll try to stop. The great thing about working for the Realtors is no matter what session, there are always issues that are relevant or embraced by some, every member at least has something that they want to support that you guys are pushing, right? I mean, it's not hyper partisan, and that's also very rewarding about this engagement.
Thank you very much, both of you. So we've talked a little bit about our priorities for the session, but what challenges do you see this year? And that can come in the form of, not just our priorities, but other people's priorities. So what challenges, Rick, I'll start with you for this year's session. What are our biggest hurdles?
I think it's contextual, or just COVID. I mean, I don't know how else to say it succinctly. I think that legislative efficiency is going to be reduced as it was last year. I think it's harder to communicate. Legislators and staff are going to have challenges in communicating with one another, and by extension, those that advocate are going to have those same challenges. The beginning of session particularly is going to be what I'm using the phrase hybrid. I don't know what else to call it. There'll be certain legislators that are on campus, so to speak, and then there'll be others that are less likely to be on campus and will be participating remotely. And so you sort of have, some folks there and some folks not there. And so if you go down, you still have to, if you go down to the building, you still have to text and call and email those that aren't. If you don't go down, you feel like you're missing out on the people that are there. So it frustrates the advocacy efforts, the quantity and the efficiency and speed of advocacy. I don't think there'll be as much done as a typical long session because of it. And I think lots of groups are sort of managing their expectations accordingly because of that. And there are other things that Courtney will touch on that are, you know, maybe outgrowths of COVID, but I think that's it. That's the sort of the big ticket sort of landscape challenge.
Yeah, I just think it's with because of COVID and I think pandemic impacts, you know, there's a, you know, there'll be some challenge around budgeting and appropriation and sort of just the overall sort of gravitational pull of the budget making process for this biennium. Obviously, it was tough to get to a budget. We did not get to a budget, you know, in last session. So we know that with new sessions come new members, creating new dynamics, new priorities for the budget making process. Although we have at the senior most level, we still have Speaker Moore, Senator Berger, but on their leadership teams, there are new personalities, new people with their own set of priorities. And so I think, you know, the challenge of, keeping the issues that are important to us and making sure that they are a priority amongst the, you know, in the midst of the budget making process is going to be, it will be a challenge because of the new personalities, because of the COVID and the COVID impact of, you know, the hybrid session that's going to be less efficient, to Rick's point. I just think that, you know, we are just going to find ourselves up against, that overarching issue of the budget and everything that drives it, which we know in previous years is, you know, healthcare, primarily Medicaid expansion. There's going to be taxes and incentives, discussions around energy and infrastructure, particularly transportation. So just the challenge will be keeping our priorities, top of mind for, in the midst of everything else that will be going on.
Great, thank you. And there are always other priorities out there that can suck all of the air out of the room and make people not think about anything else or want to do anything else until those priorities have been solved. So it does make for interesting budget discussions and otherwise. So at the start of every session, we get this tone of lawmakers that they generally seem to want to work together back and forth across the aisle. Any predictions on how long this will last, or if think we'll see less bickering with a tighter legislative contingency, or I should say party makeup in each chamber? Courtney, sorry, I should have.
So I think, I'd like to, again, because of the priority setting and as we try to, that overarching issue of budget, and making sure that, and legislators all come to session wanting to do the best they can for their districts, and, particularly when you have, I'm not going to call it a rural urban divide. I'm just going to say there are rural priorities and there are urban priorities, and how to reconcile those. And, those issues hopefully become more, I think will, continue to make things more regional and less partisan, but just as previous years, I've been around long enough to know that typically, that interest in working collaboratively, it's strained pretty immediately. So if I had the over under, how long it takes, it would be about 60, I would say, bill filing, for sure.
So chalk and march, got it.
God, is that absolutely.
Rick, any thoughts?
Well, maybe I'm a bit more optimistic, perhaps more naive as well. If I were to, and maybe I'll just be contrarian to give a different viewpoint, but again, I'm speaking maybe more with my heart than my head, Courtney. Maybe I'm wishing what I'm getting ready to say will occur versus thinking it actually will. But, I think in light of a couple of things. One, you have the elections that occurred here in North Carolina, and not a whole lot of change. And so I think for both sides, if you will, maybe that's sort of a signal. Okay, well, this is kind of where we are, and nothing really changed as a result of the election. I'm speaking in general terms, and maybe it's time that we strike a more collaborative tone. We have a new leader of the House Democrats in the House with Representative Reeves, and he certainly signaled an interest in working, towards common goals and trying to resolve some underlying issues. And so, what we've had, to Courtney's, I think reference in this answer and a previous answer, some stagnation on some issues. I think just because of that alone, perhaps, right, just sort of unresolved matters, whether it's healthcare or other items, infrastructure, there may be more of a resolve. Okay, we're past the elections, let's roll up our sleeves. I also wonder whether the results recently in Washington will give rise to more of an interest in both parties and sort of, that's not what I think either party wants to be about. And if I'm right in that, maybe they want to be seen as working on behalf of the state and getting things done and addressing issues. And so, again, this is perhaps naive. Perhaps I want it to be the case more than I think it's going to be the case. I think they'll find some issues where they can work together, then they'll squabble over things like executive power in the context of an emergency or a pandemic. That'll be the political issue, I suspect, one of maybe a couple that they'll square off on. But, maybe on infrastructure, maybe on healthcare, maybe on some other things, they'll try to collaborate. I'll keep my fingers crossed, Courtney.
Well, I think I'm sorry, Katie.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, both chambers, both parties, both caucuses, I should say, both caucuses of both chambers are led by folks who are at their core diplomatic, human beings. I think it's been well documented the professional respect that Senators Berger and Blue sort of have for each other. Speaker Moore and Representative Reeves, I think have long ago found a way to, engage and communicate. And so I think that from a process standpoint, that will contribute nicely to having processes in place in both chambers that allow for engagement. I don't think there'll be many surprises. I don't think the Democratic caucuses in either chamber should feel surprised about, legislation that's being debated and discussed in committees or things like that. From a process standpoint, that will come up. I just think that, there were just, sessions tend to, there tends to be those flashes that it's hard to predict, but that we know are sort of looming. And I guess that's what I share your optimism. I'm just a little bit more tepid.
Well, and I was just going to say that former Minority Leader Larry Hall used to say that the majority of the bills that passed the General Assembly passed with wide bipartisan support. And unfortunately, we don't hear enough about those, and we don't hear enough about the times that they do work together. So hopefully we'll continue to see some of that working together as we move forward. kind of on the same vein though, with a split legislature being run by Republicans and having a Democrat in the governor's mansion with Governor Cooper, how do we ensure that we accomplish our goals with this split government aspect? So Rick?
Yeah, I think that's the toughest question we've had so far. You know, I don't know that I have a magical answer. You sort of want to feed everyone out of the same hand, so to speak. In other words, you want to make sure that everybody has a genuine feeling that they are important and that they're getting your best effort and best access to information. And that's not only the governor's office and the Republican leadership and Republicans in the House and Senate, but the Democrat legislators for that matter as well. And so, you know, just being a resource, treating everybody with courtesy and respect as best you can, you know, prioritizing all those conversations. You know, I had a former colleague or actually supervisor that used the phrase, you know, tell the truth as fast as you can. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, you know, get out there and communicate. And again, that's going to be one of the frustrating aspects of the session, I think, is that it's just going to be harder to get to everybody as quickly as you want to. And undoubtedly, there are going to be legislators and staff that hear your news delivered from somebody else before you get to deliver it. And that's, you know, you just hope that they understand that.
Courtney, do you want to add anything on that?
I agree 100%. It's keeping the lines of communication open in all directions as best we can. It's going to be, but we know that, you know, this hybrid session is going to create all kinds of challenges, but Rick is absolutely right. It's over communicating when possible.
Good. Well, since that was the hardest question I've asked so far, I think I'll turn it over to Ray to give us a little bit of a breather.
Well, great job, guys. I just have two questions. One is more entertainment than anything. I'm usually a sports guy, and seeing we're talking Duke and, you know, Washington and Lee. Well, at least, Courtney, you've got one team that plays football, the Eagles. So I'm going to have I have two daughters, and every day in my house is a performance. So I'm going to turn it over to my softer side. And I was, you know, listening to, I always have Disney, you know, things going on, but we're growing up and we've been listening to Hamilton. So hopefully y'all know a little bit about it. And I was in the room when it happened this morning, and it made me think about Katie and you guys and us being on Zoom. And back then, Thomas Jefferson, Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, you know, came up with, you get banking, we're moving, you know, from New York to DC, as it's now known. So since we're living in Zoom world, and I see Katie has two offices, and you can't leave the legislative, you know, the governor's office and the, you know, legislative in Raleigh. You have to move it somewhere. Where would you move it and why?
Ooh.
I'll go first. I
know your answer.
I would move it to Nag's Head.
I know.
It's my home away from home. That's where we're going.
Courtney, Rick?
Courtney, they can't fire Katie.
I know. I'm sitting here like, man, this is is there really a right answer here?
Well, maybe if you pick somewhere in the east and I pick somewhere in the west, we lock arms. I'm a mountain guy, I guess, so I like the idea of somewhere in the mountains, perhaps. Of course, the challenge would be you would have a long journey from the Outer Banks to get to Ashe County or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, since I can't pick my hometown because that's where, you know, that would be Raleigh. You know, I don't know. You know, maybe, and I can't, and honestly, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I can't give it to Charlotte. So I don't know. I'm just
bring it to Greensboro.
I'm just going to say, yeah, we got to go triad. You know,
We're in the middle.
we got to bring it to the triad. Some, all those breweries in Winston and Greensboro. Yeah, let's go. We'll settle in High Point.
All right. So, because here from Greensboro, so I would bring it here to bring jobs and the economy here. So,
Absolutely.
next thing, y'all should know about the Smith Thomas house. The Heck Andrew house. When we get that accomplished and it gets going, how do you see that will take us to a different level in lobbying and having that establishment historic house there in Raleigh? How do y'all see that playing out for us to help us?
It's presence. It's, having a place to convene and sort of host, have events and meetings and, that impressive space just to, continue to, offer a unique backdrop to important policy discussions that, the realtors inevitably have with decision makers. So it's, I think just that, having that presence and that unique space would be a nice gesture.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting about it in the sense that, I drive down Blunt Street every day when I go into the office, and, legislators coming in that way will come by that office every day. Staff will come by, they'll see the sign every morning. And so I think there's some value there, just sort of in repetition, reminding policymakers of your presence, and for everything that Courtney said, having an opportunity to either for big gatherings on the lawn or even smaller gatherings, have a place that's right there. I guess I was gonna make a joke. You can keep your eye on the lieutenant governor's office, the governors, the legislature. It's all right there. So proximity for your staff is of value as well.
And proximity to the strategic location of Krispy Kreme.
Woo!
Not to be understated
That hot
or
donut
undervalued.
Love the glazed.
Well, I was just going to say, you're realtors. You know about location. Makes a difference. So.
Well, I do want to thank everybody for this wonderful meeting. Katie or Mark, do you have anything to add before I?
Well, I think I have one or two more just quick questions that I'd like to ask the gentleman about engagement.
Go right ahead.
So making sure that you all understand how important it is that we remain engaged. And so, Rick and Courtney, I'll just ask you, how important is it that realtors engage with elected officials in our advocacy efforts? Sorry. Oh, Courtney.
Look, I mean, it's hard to overstate the importance, right? I mean, I think that we have in the legislature, and I think Rick talked about it a moment ago, the fact that we get into these translation activities where we're trying to take these very sometimes dense pieces of legislation and really unpack the policy so that legislators and their staff can understand the practical impacts of a policy and a proposal in their districts, but nobody makes that translation and connects those dots better than the realtors themselves, living in the same communities with these legislators, talking about the issue, those hot button issues that are important, that are impacting the industry, and that legislators have an opportunity to do something about to make the industry that much more that much stronger. And because it's an incredibly important, the health of the real estate industry is, again, it contributes so much to the overall health of the business community in every community. So I just think that staying engaged, really being in relationship with these legislators, meeting them at home, seeing them around town, is incredibly important. Really hard to overstate it just because of, just the ability to make that translation in practical ways in context of community.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to add. I agree with what Courtney said. I mean, I think we are, Courtney and I and the others are sort of part of the team, but a component of the team, and the big value that you guys have is, there are a couple of things. One, the quantity, the strength in numbers that you guys bring to bear in terms of your membership and your presence across the state. But as my former law partner, Chuck Neely, and former legislator, would always remind me that, the realtors are the real people, right? I mean, they're the ones in the district, the ones that vote, the ones that participate politically, the ones that go to church or, Kiwanis Club or whatever it may be with legislators and their families, et cetera. And so there's a connectivity there that is of great value, that no matter how great Courtney is, how modest my abilities are, we can't, that's not our role, right? And it's an incredibly valuable role in this whole effort. So not to be undervalued.
Thank you. And just sort of to get back to one of the first questions Pam asked, do you think we're going to have any time off this year? Or when do you think we'll actually end this legislative session, given the redistricting, the budgeting processes, things of that nature? So Rick.
So I'm going to be optimistic again, Courtney. You can be the wet blanket about negative. Well, we've heard, I guess, that there's at least some plan to adjourn and come back for redistricting later in the year. So we just don't know any of the specifics. I also wonder whether we're going to have a sort of a formal spring break. Who knows? To Pam's really good observation, Tennessee and pretty much all the states around us have schedules where they come in and they adjourn at a date certain. Now they pack a lot more into those days that they're in their state capitals than we do, but they have greater certainty. And there's a whole broader conversation about, should we restructure our legislative branch, if you will, so we can provide that certainty and recruit folks, et cetera, to serve. I don't know why anybody would serve. God bless them. I hope, again, this is me sort of speaking with my heart, perhaps more than my head. I think, given that, what we have as, Americans and just humans in general the last year or so have gone through, I do think there's probably a desire to get back to district, sometime this summer, and especially if they're going to have to turn around and come back for redistricting at some point in the fall. So I guess I'm cautiously optimistic that there is a pathway there for some sensible date of adjournment, maybe July, maybe early August. I'm just throwing dates out. And part of this is I hope that it occurs in a time that we'll all be able to take vacation before at least Courtney's oldest daughter goes back to school. She's not in year round. So.
Yeah, she, as they informed me a few years ago, they're going on vacation. They'd love for me to join them, right? My presence is only required a little bit when it comes to vacation, and so anyway, I'm gonna join you, Rick. I'm gonna say right now, this will be, although COVID challenge, this will be a very efficient session when it comes to not just appropriations decision making, but finance and tax decision making. They're going to settle all that, by early June. Budget will be ready by the end of June. They're going to wrap session up by the second week of July. We're going to take a 2-week break. They're going to come back in August. Redistricting will happen wrap up before Labor Day, and we're all going to enjoy watching the leaves turn in Western North Carolina for this fall.
Well, from your lips to their ears.
Wow. Wow.
And there's only coffee in my Starbucks cup.
I don't believe that.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'll turn it back over to Ray for any closing.
Wow, still. How many donuts did you have? Well, of course you knew when I threw out that question, y'all are both being asked to go visit the mountains and go down to Wilmington. So Courtney, go to Wilmington, and Rick, the mountains, of course, love you now. So, but I want to thank everybody, all of our lobbyists and guests for being here. Want to remind everybody, 2 o'clock in about an hour and 10 minutes, we're going to have the legislative committee. So please join us for that. Once again, want to thank everybody and remind everybody, if you haven't invested in RPAC, you should, especially if you're the people on this meeting and listening to this forum, you should be the first ones in line. And especially my committee, legislative, we want to be 100%. And the other committees, the RPAC, I know we want to beat those guys. So please call Ms. Nash, get your investment in before 2 o'clock. So once again, and there's a way to do that. So I'm going to remind you about the RPAC raffle. So you have the opportunity to win a grand prize of $15,000. Wow, that'd be a good RPAC investment. Or 35 $1,000 prizes, so you could be silver. So I'm, strongly, as I've said, encourage, because I'm a big, huge advocate for fighting for personal property rights, and I know if you're on this forum, you are too. So having a strong PAC is such an important part of our advocacy efforts. So please invest to the PAC. So, buy a raffle ticket. So want to adjourn this by saying thank y'all so much. It was great. And don't drink too much more coffee, Courtney. And Rick, thank you. Katie, as always, you're incredible. Thank you all for being here. And we'll see you soon. I hope in person. Love everybody and talk to you soon.